All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today. We're going to go through a few different resources for you today. And there's going to be an opportunity to ask questions at the end, so please be thinking of them as we go through the content here. I also wanted to let everyone know that we are recording this webinar, so it will be possible to access it after the event is over. I'll send out a follow-up email to everyone who registered with a link where they can find it online. And of course, if you have any questions about IdeaScale or today's event or the resources we go over, you can forward them to me. Let's get started here. So we're going to go over quite a few different topics when it comes to community engagement, which is very similar to social engagement, which means we're going to talk about your audience, how to know who they are, different channels that you can use to communicate, sort of the frequency of the communications, types of messages you might want to send, and beyond. So I imagined that most of you joined this event today because you already know the value of involving multiple opinions and people in the innovation process. This graph is from research from Stephen Johnson, who has already documented that the more networked and connected an idea is, the more likely it is to be transformative. There's even some new research that indicates that diversity unlocks innovation and drives market growth. They say that employees at companies with diversity are 45% more likely to report that their firm's market share grew over the previous year, and 70% more likely to report that the firm captured a new market. So in this graph here, you can see that he's tracking ideas that are done by an individual or those that were a product of collaboration and networking. And you can see that especially as we get into our recent history, it's the ideas that are networked that are far more likely to be transformative. So this is one of the reasons that crowdsourcing is such a powerful tool, of course, for innovation. Ideas can become networked transparently, and the crowd offers diversity not achieved in small groups, but there are drawbacks as well. And here's the challenge put to us out by Jeff Howe, the author of Crowdsourcing. The hardest part of crowdsourcing is to achieve critical mass and sustain the volume and activity of the crowd. So that's what we're going to help you with today, give you an overview of some crowd mechanics and communication strategies when it comes to ideation communities. So first things first. A lot of people overlook this step when they're building out a communications plan for their community, and that's getting to know your audience. So I think for many of you, you might think this is a relatively simple practice because you are collaborating with your employees, so that you think that you don't even have to do this. But I think it's a good practice for anyone who's looking to develop a meaningful communication strategy to think about who it is that they want to reach and why this initiative might matter to them. So on this side, you can see some audience personas. There is no hard and fast rule that I've ever found on what you include when you're building a persona, but when you're thinking about your audience, you should think about using some sort of demographic information, just the basics like their age or where they're located, behavioral information like who do they listen to, what sorts of publications do they read, where do they spend their time, and then psychographic information like what matters to them, what motivates them, what are their goals in the workplace, what are their personal goals. And then if you want to build some of these formal personas to help sort of structure your thinking, there's a tool called Extensio that has like free templates that help you build these profiles. And I'll be sharing that in the resources after this webinar. Sometimes you'll even need multiple personas, but your answer to these questions are going to determine your strategy in some of these subsequent sections. Like if you know what it is that they listen to, what it is that they read, or where they spend their time, you're going to know which channels you should use to communicate with them. If you want to understand some of the psychographic information, like what motivates them, then you'll know what sorts of messages are going to resonate with them and what tone of communications you should use. So this is why it's important to at least consider who you want to reach before you begin. So this brings us to which channels are you going to use to communicate with your audience? A lot of program administrators think that this is a snap and they'll just email all their employees on their listserv and their communications program will be done. But I'm afraid this is not the case. Certainly we love email and it's still one of the highest converting channels for communicators across industries, but it is simply not enough. So this screenshot that I'm about to show is from our Innovation Communications Plan infographic, which will also be available in the resources email following this call. Basically, we recommend that every innovation communications plan include at least 4 of these channels. Even if you're doing an internal innovation program, in fact, maybe even especially if you're doing an internal program because you have more opportunity to use more creative channels, even on a lower budget, then you should definitely be taking advantage of this opportunity. So there are many channels available to you, starting with your website. Putting a link to the community or using one of IdeaScale's widgets to embed an IdeaScale on your site is a really powerful way to get people to get involved. So if it's for your employees, maybe just put it on your intranet. But social media is also a really powerful tool that our customers use to great effect. So you should invite people to participate wherever it is that you're finding they're spending their time. If it's on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, if it's in your company, your Yammer feed or your Slack feed, wherever your audience is spending your time. Public relations obviously is tried and true. It's a great way to demonstrate other forms of buy-in in your program as well. So your CEO talking about the initiative or writing blog posts or guest blog posts, doing press releases, getting other people to write about your program is a really great way to build credibility. And one of your most powerful channels is your partner network, of course, especially for those public engagements, because these folks are great evangelists and they have a network that you don't have access to. So some of our customers will even send out communications kits to their partners that have content for them to share, like email assets, messaging, things for them to use when they're promoting your program. And of course, any chance to promote your program in person is really powerful. Some of our customers kick off their most successful campaigns at their annual meeting. Others include as part of their pre-shift reminders to their staff. And of course, there are plenty of opportunities for offline promotion, especially for those workplace engagements. You could put table tents in your cafeterias, posters on the walls, flyers, and then you can get even more creative. Some of you can use push notifications if you have access to your community members via mobile. One of our customers even hired an actor to come into their home office and go around to each of their employees and tell them the value of sharing their ideas on this program. So if you want, you can follow up with me after this webinar to see examples of artifacts in each of these different channels. But how often should you be communicating? Many of you marketers out there know that there's this old marketing rule of thumb that says someone needs to be exposed to your message at least 7 times before they will take any sort of action. And this is because they're hearing your message in this world full of noise. They don't understand your relevance yet, or maybe you haven't built enough credibility. So that's why communication efforts need to be ongoing. So this slide from Marketing Sherpa actually shows that people expect to be hearing from someone on at least a weekly basis. And certainly they expect to hear from you monthly, but weekly is actually one of the next best ways to communicate with people. And this doesn't mean that you can't send more or less messages than this, but it does mean that people aren't going to be shocked or appalled by multiple messages from you. In fact, IdeaScale has noted within their communities that there's a 5-day half-life after an email is sent, inviting people to participate. So if a message goes out asking people to participate on Monday, by Friday, everything has dropped back down to normal and you have to find new ways of engaging them. But hopefully you're using multiple channels, and hopefully this means that you're doing something beyond email, so that's great. Find ways to share your messages regularly in meaningful ways, nearly every day, in order to get that maximum level of engagement. Now, we can talk about some key messages, which we'll take in a few different sections. But when it comes to content, you're going to need to vary the messages and the tone. For example, you should definitely have some positive reinforcement messages talking about the value of participating, or maybe the rewards that you're offering, as well as potential negative messages like the campaign is going to be closing in a few days. You're going to miss your chance to weigh in. You're also going to want to talk about both the intrinsic value, like how it feels good to help build a product, and the value of participating in a community at all, as well as the extrinsic value, like the recognition that you'll get from participating in a program. But throughout the campaign, there are a few key touch points that you're going to build those messages around. So one of the most obvious and probably one of the most important is your campaign launch. So this is where you're going to want a really well-written problem statement. You're going to want to explain the incentives of participating, the requirements, any sort of criteria or rules, the workflow that you plan on going through to select ideas. The messages here should get people really excited about participation. It should kind of spark imagination, talk about the value of not just contributing ideas, but helping build on other people's ideas. But another key message as the campaign progresses is to keep up that excitement and demonstrate that people are paying attention to the flow of ideas by talking about popular, promising ideas. It really helps foster healthy competition. It keeps the conversation going. So it's a great time to start utilizing social media to either broadcast those ideas or point them out to particular individuals by calling them out in at mentions. People who might be personally interested in building the idea and advocate for it, or people who might be opposed to it and would comment on it or stimulate other conversation. And then as ideas move beyond ideation, it's really important to let people know that there's been movement. This helps build faith in the program, and it actually finds advocates and new team members to help with implementation. It's one of the reasons why people can follow an idea on IdeaScale, and then they get updates when the idea has progress. So it's another opportunity to connect with individuals, but also broadcast at the same time. You can easily let people know, the followers of an idea know what's happening to it. And you can also tell the community at large when ideas are progressing. But then, of course, once you've selected some ideas that you know you're going to be moving forward with, make sure that you tell people about that. Talk about what the merits of the idea were, why they were suggested, why they were selected, who researched it, and what's going to happen next to it. So this brings us to the most powerful part of your communications plan. This is the linchpin of a successful communication strategy. I can tell you that if you don't get this part right, your program does not have any long-term viability. So to have an successful innovation communications plan, you must implement ideas. If you don't, no one will have faith in your program. No one will have a reason to participate. Even if you give rewards, but you don't implement ideas, you're eventually going to lose steam, and the overall progress of your program will suffer because of its lack of legitimacy. So we know that no one on this webinar would make that mistake. So when you do implement ideas, this is one of the best messages to share, because it shows that you're effective and that the ideas of the participants matter and that change is possible. So showcase your prototypes. Share your launches, the new programs, the new processes, the big ideas, and even the small ones. We also remind our customers that it doesn't have to be an innovation that blows the doors off your business matter, especially with young programs. So it's important to find those just do it ideas and start implementing those right away. Find some of that low-hanging fruit and share the news when you've done so. And this is going to help pave the way for bigger ideas. And then finally, of course, there is no bigger crowning achievement than an idea that has generated real results. And this means revenue generated, time saved in the office, testimonials from your customers. This helps you keep the program around for the long term and continues to help you source bigger ideas. So it's an even bigger opportunity to demonstrate your thought leadership. So this is a really great reason to do some wide promotion, do a press release, get an article in Forbes, get the CEO to mention it company-wide. Now we come to the crowdsourcing secret weapon, which is your moderators. One of the best things about moderators is that they can help you respond to the crowd, highlight great ideas, and continue engagement, but do that at scale. So you should assign some moderators at the start of any campaign launch and give them some key messages that they might want to share, maybe some basic text that they can use to help thank people for ideas, some question prompts, reminders to participate, things like that. You might find that as a campaign gains traction, others will want to volunteer to help with moderation, and that's one of the best things about using a program like this. But to help with all moderators, it's good to define some goals for them. How often should they log in? What should they do with their time when they're in there? Do they have incentives for participating? There should be, because there's a lot of heavy lifting for crowd engagement that happens for moderators. So it's also good if moderators have some level of domain expertise on a particular campaign. This makes it easier for them to leave meaningful comments on ideas and stimulate more discussion. But even if they're not the experts, they can connect the idea with experts by mentioning them in the comments, sharing the idea with them, and making it more visible to the people who might be interested in it. But how often should this happen? Some of our most successful customers report that they have at least some sort of movement on every single idea, even if it's just thanking them for submitting. And then other communities say that they won't let an idea stay in any one stage for more than 2 weeks without providing some sort of update on what the next steps are. And then finally, one of the most talked about things when it comes to innovation community engagement, incentives. There could be an entire whole webinar about innovation incentives. And in fact, we've already done one. And the link to that will also be provided in our follow-up. But there's a lot of thoughts about whether or not to provide incentives, what kind of incentives works best. And here are a few things to consider. One, IdeaScale's customer base has used basically every type of incentive with success. It depends more on the program strategy, overall goals, and on its support throughout the company than it does on incentives, however. Another thing to keep in mind, rewards do not have to be monetary. We have an entire sheet of non-monetary rewards, everything from being the person that gets to name a new product or lunch with the CEO. And we'll also provide that list after the webinar. And then most of the leading research states that true recognition is perhaps more valuable than monetary rewards. So even if you're doing monetary rewards, don't leave out recognition company-wide. And then one of the things that we'll want to talk about just quickly from the other webinar is Professor Tubia's research from the Columbia University, which specifically researched the efficacy of incentives in innovation programs. And he had some really interesting findings. His research found that the most effective behavior to incentivize was not the submission of winning ideas, but on the amount of engagement that they generate. That means the idea that generates the most views, shares, votes, etc. So not only did this generate more participation overall, but it also increased the quality of ideas by 40%. And this is one of the reasons why we created the Engage badge within the IdeaScale community, which acknowledges the community member who's achieved this feat. Most of the time, IdeaScale recommends a mix of incentives to its customers, random rewards for participation, rewards for engagement, just as we discussed, and then rewards, of course, for the implemented ideas, even if those incentives are just recognition. So let's take the opportunity to show you how some of this works in an innovation community. So there are a lot of engagement tools in IdeaScale, but I'm just going to focus on two important touch points that we've already covered, the campaign launch email and idea sharing. So you can see that IdeaScale has an entire section dedicated to engagement tools, including its email editing tools. But we're going to look into the tools built into campaign creation. So let's look at this particular campaign about operations improvements, where you can edit everything from the campaign brief. And this is where you, of course, want to have some great writers who are giving additional information, all of those reasons to participate, you know, which incentives you might be using. But remember how one of the key touch points, one of the key messages is, of course, the campaign launch. So once you've enabled the email campaign, then you're going to get a predefined email preview of the campaign. It's going to automatically select the image associated with the campaign, as well as the description of the campaign that you've already loaded in. You'll see the campaign owner. You'll see a preview of the email, but you'll also be able to edit the content down below. And depending on the goals of the campaign, you can share it with specific groups. In this case, you could just send it to finance or human resource, or you can send it to the entire community at large. But once it's scheduled and saved, the campaign email will help you launch the campaign's initial engagement push. But don't forget, of course, these other engagement tactics, all of those other channels that you want to use. But since we're talking about them, let's talk about the way you can socialize an idea on the idea detail level as well. So here we have an idea about pushing more customers to paperless billing. You can see that if social sharing is turned on within a community, it is possible for anyone to share an idea through the most common social media platforms. You could share it on Twitter, and of course it's going to give you the main idea title, and it's going to give the link to the community back to the idea. And it's important to share some of these ideas off the platform so that you can invite more conversation into the platform. So we highly recommend having social sharing on. You can also see that one of the top comments here, pinned to the top, was a moderator comment, and he's responding right away. And he's even commenting privately to other people here. You can see people pulling in expert commentary here by mentioning people who can elevate the level of discussion. And one of the other great things about this idea in particular is that it has used an image and added that to the idea. And since in this way, innovation communities are very similar to social media communities, one of the rules holds true for that content with imagery on it has 40% more engagement than those who do not. So even if there isn't an image on the idea, it is possible for administrators and moderators to edit ideas and add imagery if they like as well in order to increase engagement. And of course, if you follow an idea, all followers of an idea receive updates on an idea as it moves through additional stages. And obviously there are more aspects of the tool that we could discuss for improving engagement, like enabling SSO for social login, the gamification system we talked to, but I'd like to start opening it up for questions from our audience.